Hi guys, happy Sunday and welcome to the July live for patrons on here. How's everyone doing? I can see there's just one person so far, but I'm just going to pretend like I'm talking to a bunch of people because I know this will be available for a replay after and you guys will engage. So yeah, here we go. Let me know in the chat who's here. As I am just getting my stuff ready and doing a brief chit chat with you guys. Okay, so for today, I just had an event on Friday where a live event at Dylan's Distillery up here in Ontario. And I decided to show people how to do the pansy just because I think the pansy is a simplistic enough flower where you can learn the basics of watercolor, or not even the basics, the most important part of watercolor, which is the blending part, and just to sort of experience the colors mixing. So I figured I'll do something along the lines of this with you guys. You guys are beyond basic, I'm sure, but we're going to do a little bit of, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how to get the mix, the colors involved in the mixing, and then the different results that you can get with wet on wet versus wet on dry, that sort of thing. And I think the pansy, again, is a beautiful flower to use for displaying those things. Okay, so, oh, I see there's two people here. Who's here? Let me know in the comments. This was this week's video tutorial on YouTube, or this past week. I hope you guys had a chance to check it out. I absolutely loved this. I hope you guys take this idea and do it with alphabets or numbers, whatever you want to do. It's just such a lovely, pretty idea. And again, done all with the Princeton Petals brush. This is the first exclusive video that is going to come to you guys shortly. So stay tuned for that. And I'm just going to rip this sheet over so I can turn and we can begin our study of pansies today. Okay, there we go. So really quickly, hi Jill. Wasn't sure if it was you or not, but I'm glad you're here. Let me go through my supplies really quickly. So I'm using my Daler-Rowney set of 36 watercolors. For my paper, I'm using my, it's this way, my Zen Art Supplies watercolor paper. And then for brushes, I mentioned in the description below, we're using the number 4 Velvetouch and then number 6 Princeton Petals. And let's see, anything else? No, paper towel is handy. Paper towel is handy here, and I've got water to the side, and I think we are good to begin. I'm just going to lightly move my paints this way so I can so you guys can see the screen, and maybe zoom out a bit so you can see my mixing, which I have to switch this over this way. And here's the water. So you can see. Okay, so let's begin. So I want to touch on a couple of things here really quickly. Let me just make sure that the lighting is also good before I begin. 1 second. Okay, so I want to touch on a couple of things really quickly before we begin. Let's talk about the colors. Now, the colors, one of the things I want to make sure that when you're blending colors, and especially when you're learning how to do the blending, to get nice, pleasing to the eye results, it's always nice to have colors that when they blend, they give you a beautiful result. So for instance, if you take like a really nice blue with a light cotton candy sort of pink, so I think like a sky blue with, or a cobalt blue with like a quinacridone rose or something, and you do the blend, you'll get a beautiful purple in between. So that's just an example that I'm giving you, but now you know what I mean. So like a yellow with maybe a vermilion will give you, again, a beautiful blend, things like that. So keep that in mind when we are tackling this, because again, as always, I would love it if you guys use the colors that you like, but feel free to use the ones I'm using as we go along, if that's just like a warm-up for you. To take a sip of my coffee. Okay, here we go. Let's begin. I'm going to use this area over here to do my mixing, and I'm going to use a sheet of paper just to do a little bit of testing with you guys before we actually begin. So just to show you about the mixing of colors that I'm talking about. I'll keep this at the top here, and let's use, I don't have my swatching sheet here for my Daler-Rowney colors, but let's use the ultramarine pink, for example, and I will use like a deep purple to go with this, even though it's very, very, very close. So you know what, let me just take another color. Ultramarine violet, let me just see what that looks like. Actually, swatching the colors might be a good idea. Start off there. This is my ultramarine violet right here. And this is my ultramarine pink. So that's a pretty combination, I think. So we could totally do something like this. They're very, very close in color, so I'll keep those colors aside. Here's the cobalt violet that I was also considering. And this is what that looks like. So this is a nice deep purple that might go nicely with that pink as well. So let's start off with using the ultramarine violet and the cobalt violet. And I'm going to show you the technique for creating the petal. I know most of you do know this, but one of the things I realized over the live in-person session at Dylan's was a lot of people were using their brush like a pencil, where they're just, and I'm going to demonstrate that, get some color, where they're kind of drawing it in like this, the teardrop, and then painting it in. While there's nothing wrong with this, the beauty of watercolor lies in my opinion, the less strokes the better, and the cleaner the look of your end result. You're not going to get it drying off with multiple lines and strokes within your petal. So less is more. So my suggestion is mix your color. And hold your brush a little bit past this point and use the full length of your brush to draw in that petal. And this will also give you organic results, less control over the shape of your petal as well, which you can always fix a bit after. So here we go, pressing down. Notice how much I'm pressing down, and I'm kind of twirling around, bringing it downward. Dipping the tip of my brush in water, I'm covering the center up. All this took me was 2 strokes, right? And then if you want to perfect the edges or do something, make it a little bit more frilly or whatever, you can go in and add a little bit more in there. Now, one of the other things to do before this dries off to get that seamless blend is making sure you add your bottom blend to the center right before it dries up. Now, one of the things you might also encounter, another thing to watch out for, and this will come with practice, is realizing that as you're painting along, sometimes even though you're quick enough to catch this blend, part of your area might get dry quicker than some of the other areas. And what you'll see happening is you'll get a beautiful blend on one side, but you'll get more of a rigid I guess, rigid blend on the other side. I'm zooming in so you can see better. So you can see how it blended here, but it kind of just stopped short. Whoops, stopped short over here on this end. So it's just something to look out for, because it all depends on how much water you're carrying in your brush when you first do that initial stroke. So some of you might want to deliberately just take in a tad bit more water on your brush when you're first doing your petal. So let me just do this again. But there's one more thing to look out for when you're doing this. So I'm painting that in, do my second stroke, and third one to kind of perfect that outer boundary, and then just sort of fixing my inner bit here. Now, while I've taken a lot of water and I've done this in, and I'm adding my little strokes of purple, another thing that could possibly happen is if you have too much water on your petal, and I don't think I have too much water on my petal here, but I'm going to add a drop for another version to show you, you'll get pooling. And this is what pooling would look like. Let me just take a whole bunch and just sort of add that in here as a regular shape. And then I'm taking in my dark color, and I'm going to drop that in here. This is still not enough water to show you the pooling, so I'm going to drop in some more water here. Like, the color will not go beyond that area where it is pooling. That's the result you will get. And again, this is not the best example, so let me just see if I can do it one more time to show you what I mean. So now I know I have pooling over there. The water is just collecting there. If I add that in, it's giving me a little bit of a bloom. It's pushing the water out, but sometimes it just sits on there. And I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what I'm referring to. I'm just not able to get you the best result right now. Yeah, but there's a little bit of pooling here. You're not getting a blend out with those nice little organic bloomings happening like over here, right? So watch how these, let's allow this to dry and we'll come back and you can see how these dry up. But these are just some things to look out for when you are doing something as simple as a peony, or even if you're trying to blend the sky, for instance. Just very, very basic things to look out for. Okay, so let's actually start doing the full peony. And then I'm going to revert to my sheet of Zen art supplies and we will begin our mini composition or array of different peonies. So this time I'm going to switch my technique a bit. So I'm still getting that ultramarine pink. And like I mentioned, holding my brush sideways, I'm going to go in, twirl it around, bring it down, and then close it up. You can just dab in more color just to sort of make it darker around the edges so it's not very, very light. Give the top of your petal a little bit of a swirl if you want to. Just make it more organic looking, just like that. And then I'm going to take a little bit more directly from my color cake and I'm dropping this in at the edges. I just wanted to give it more of that nice darker look at the edge. Some of the peonies have that. And then I'm getting my darker tone, which is the cobalt violet, and I'm dropping that in right here. So when you get that good enough mix or dampness happening within your petal, you get a nice beautiful bloom. Now you can end with the one little dab of color where it seeps through. However, it's going to end up drying off kind of just like a two-tone range, and you want a deeper, darker center. So the way to do that is just go back in with a darker color, and I would suggest like a Payne's gray or something like that, using that on the tip of your brush, and just continue dabbing it before this area dries off. So you're getting that nice dark center, getting into that deep purple, and then blending out into a pink. and it makes such a huge difference. And you can see the difference between, for instance, this one and this. This one's still kind of drying up. Not the best result on camera over here, but you can see it. So keep these things in mind, and if you ever get too much pooling, paper towel is your friend, don't forget. Okay, so let's complete this one here, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to do another petal just like this. Make sure if you're not able to kind of get those nice rounds, turn your paper around. This one looks like I'm going to have to do 4 petals here. And I'm leaving white space in between-ish. While they're connecting, I'm not having them connect fully, and I'm trying to leave as much white space as I can. And even if you get a little bit of the black or the Payne's gray into your petals, that is completely okay. We're doing that loose style of watercolor, and so sometimes having that really does help. And then you get some of the deep purple and just add that to the center, allowing it to bloom. And this exercise, just like I mentioned in the beginning of this class, is all about realizing how to get different sorts of blends based on how much watercolor ratio you've got going on, and how different levels of dryness to your I guess surface before you add the color in. Now I'm going to go around the edges of this petal here and show you what that looks like, because now this area is not damp anymore. So I'm still trying to get an edge, but this would be considered more of a wet on dry technique, where the edges are more solid versus we got a blend in there and that's still drying up. So here we go. And there's nothing wrong with either of the techniques. It really depends on what you as the artist wants to achieve. What technique are you looking for? What do you like? What is your preference? And so just keep these things in mind that I have pointed out, and you should be good to go. I'm getting a little bit more of that black. I'm dropping that in over here. And then it's just blooming into the pink. Okay, so let's move over to the next sheet, get a little bit of this stuff done, and then we can start. Actually, before I move on to the next, I just want to say one more thing. So there's pansies that have like a back petal, which is a much darker color. So you wait to do this until once this is dried up completely. So this is sort of almost dried up. I'm going to get that dark. Actually, this is not dark enough. I'm going to get a darker bluish sort of color. What do I have? Is this an ultramarine blue? I don't think this is dark enough. No, this is very bright. That's just okay. Oh, that's way too bright. Okay, I think I have one over here. You can also just get Payne's gray and mix it up with some of the purple. But because I have so many different colors here, I'm just trying to see if there's one that goes with this. Okay, I can't find one right away, and I don't want to waste time. So we're going to get a little bit of this color here, cobalt violet. And I'm mixing it in with some of the Payne's gray. And so now I've gotten like this really dark looking color. I'm just going in, kind of outlining this area, and just completely painting it in. Gives you a little bit more control over how the shape of this petal turns out. I'm pushing all the color inside. And there you have it. Not the best blending. I guess it's because of the kind of paper. This is like the student grade paper, but let's do this on the Zen Art Supply sheet of paper now. All right, so here we go. Just make sure this is just good. Okay, so we'll start off with doing 2 of these colors, 2 flowers in these colors over here, and then we'll move on to doing some other hues. I'm going to also keep handy the quinacridone magenta, and that looks like this. So it's like a nice pink color. And then I'm going to highlight that with I know I took out some of the colors from this, so that's why I'm just looking for it. Here we go. This is the Rose Madder, and it's a very pretty darker sort of reddish tone. It looks like that. But there was another one that would go even better with this, and it's here. And this is Purple Lake. So Purple Lake and this color, not the Madder, okay? Okay, pushing this aside, let's begin. So starting off with my basic ultramarine pink, mixing some color. Now, one of the other techniques you can also use to do this is introducing another brush, say like a number 6, and just go in and create your damp area. I'm just going to get a little bit of a lighter pink hue on here so you can actually maybe see it. So I'll do one here. Well, you can barely see the color. So just dampening the area with a very, very light color. And then you can go in with that color that you want, drop it at the edges, get that nice, beautiful bloom while making it look like a light petal on the center. And then go in with your darker second hue, and for that we are using Cobalt Violet again, and I'm just touching the edges at the bottom and kind of extending and drawing little lines from the inside coming towards the center. And the more lines you sort of overlap on this, the darker it gets, just like that whole going in with the second color bit. And you get that result. So at this point, if you want to add that darker tone, just for a nice seamless blend, I'm just getting some of that darker mix we had, and I'm just dropping little dabs within the center here. And so we've got a nice dark to light effect happening. So let's just continue. I'll do 2 more petals, and then we are done this one flower. So going back in, this time I'm using the regular technique that I showed you guys, holding it a little bit higher up here, pressing down the full length of my brush, and then twirling. You can see right here I don't have enough water or color on my brush, and so that's why I got those white spaces. It's okay. Go back in, close it up, pull it down, perfect your edges however you like them to be. And then I'm getting a little bit more of that color directly from the color cake, dropping it in around the edges just like I did in the first one. And then going in for the violet And dropping that in here. And it's giving me that wiry sort of look. Getting a little bit of the darker tone, and I'm dropping that in just at the center. Now this one, notice how it's sort of blended higher than anticipated, and sometimes that will happen. Again, it all depends on the distribution of water and the space that you have happening with the color. So it went a little bit higher than anticipated, and sometimes you can just maybe lightly take it off and just dab on your paper towel, or if you just want to leave it that way for the sake of a study and learning the results that you can get, that's totally fine too. Happy accidents happen all the time. Sometimes you just sort of want to go with the flow as well. But I just didn't want some of these textures, so I'm wiping it off. But I do love the blends that's happened over here. Okay, so we're moving on to our third one. Again, I'm pressing down the full length of the brush. Really trying to be as minimal as I can with the amount of strokes that I add in there. And I'm really pushing all the water to the center, or color, watercolor, whatever it is that you are using dominantly. And then getting the color directly from the color cake, nice thick portion of it, and just dropping it at the edges to give me that nice seamless blend into the petal. Again, you get the seamless blend only when it is still damp. If it is not damp, it's just going to sort of sit there like an outline. Then we're going in for the violet. And we're just dropping that in strokes at the center. When you add it in strokes, you're kind of giving it a direction as well sometimes, again, depending on how the water is sitting on the paper as well. And you get that nice beautiful blend. And then I just want to darken that center a bit more. So I'm getting a little bit of the mixture that we did with the Payne's Gray and the violet. I'm dropping that in right at the very bottom. And then there you have it. Notice I have left the center white, and that just helps the whole thing breathe a little bit more. And as we've waited longer, you can see that the color it's not as dark in the center, it's kind of blended in with the purple. And this happens when you've got too much water in your color mixture. So there's the water to color ratio is more water, less color. And so it's giving you like a very even blending, making it look kind of like one color as opposed to a darker center. So when this happens, that's okay. Just wait for it to dry a tad bit more before you go in with that darker tone, and just make sure that you're getting your color mixed where it's more color and less water, or take it directly from the color cake, which is also helpful, so that when you drop it in your center now, like I'm doing right now, it's more potent at the very center and you get a smooth blend. You just want that center to be the deepest, darkest area of the flower, and then as it's seeping outward, it gets lighter. Areas like this, where it's looking like little textures, you can just sort of blend it in downward and just dab your brush on a paper towel. You're kind of helping smoothen out these textures that you might not necessarily want to see in your petal or in your area, because this is something that you can use really while painting anything. So again, you can see how I push that downward to the center, and it's so much smoother in comparison to these guys here, where I didn't quite smooth it out by pushing it down. Or I did this actually a little later. while it was dried up just a tad bit. So if you catch this earlier on, you're able to get a nice smooth effect happening. So again, it's all about timing. How long did you wait for it to dry up? When did you go in? How much color? How much water? So many different factors. I'm pointing this out so you can pay attention to these during your paint sessions. Doesn't necessarily have to be a pansy. It can be anything, and keep these things in mind. Okay, let's do, I spent so much time talking about these details. I'm going to move on to the next two colors that I said we were going to do. Going to do a quick pause. Actually, not doing a pause, but I'm just going to ask if anyone has any questions so far about what I have shown. Let me know in the comments and I can address that. I just want to make sure you guys are grasping things as I'm going along and it's not too fast. Okay, mixing some color while I give you guys some time. I'm going to get the quinacridone magenta. What did I do first? Was it... I'm just making sure I get the right color first. So I'm just blending it in. Okay, so this is the magenta that we're using. And I'm just going to get a little bit of that mixed over here. So we're using this for the base, and then we're using the Purple Lake for the darker tone. So nice bright pink color. And I'm doing the same thing here. Maybe even giving more of a fluffy rounded edge to the sides of this petal. And then going in for my Purple Lake. And I'm going to drop the Purple Lake right in the center here. Little strokes like we did in the previous ones. Awesome. This is giving me a nice smooth blend. And then before we move on to anything, I want to give it more of a deep purple center. And so for that, we're using some of the, we're mixing some of the quinacridone magenta with a little bit of that dark hue that we have here. And that'll just give us a nice deeper, darker version of the light color. So adding that right here to the center, and I'm just dabbing dots. Maybe even pulling it down just a bit. There we go. We've got that nice seamless look. And we move on to doing the next petal. This one, because it's downward and I'm not turning the orientation of my page, I'm doing a couple of different strokes, but really again using the full span of my brush to get that in there. Okay, then going in with the next color, which is the quinacridone, the Purple Lake. I'm dropping that right here. Again, you can notice, you can see how this is drying up over here. So dabbing off all the color from my brush and pull this downward. Color and water. Give me a nice smooth transition into my petal. All right, so this blended off really seamlessly, so we need to get a darker color for this. So Purple Lake, mixing with the dark hue right here, and then I'm just dropping that in here. Again, perfect. I'm just going to drop some over here at the edges too, because I know some of them have like a random petal that has like a darker color to the edge, which is also very pretty. And you get a nice, beautiful effect there. So many different variations of the pansies that really collectively they make such such a pretty sight, especially when you're using like doing this in watercolor. Okay, so let me do one more petal. Downward, kind of just being mindful of this flower over here, so I'm going around it. There we go. So now we got that one. And going back in directly to get the dark color. I'm not even going to bother with the lighter one. I'm just adding that in here. Now again, it's giving me that sort of veiny look and then just dispersing off altogether. The reason that is happening is because I have too much water in my blend. So it's just when you add too much water over an area that already has too much water, it's just going to blend in and give you like a look that looks like this, as opposed to something like this, which is gradual, dark to light. So these ratios and variations are very, very important to get that seamless look. So going back in, I'm mixing a little bit of that purple lake with some of the darker tone. And I'm going to drop it in again. And that's okay for now. So I'm going to allow that to dry, and then we can always go back in and add one more layer of color. Because right now it's very smooth and it's pretty, but you still want that nice dark, you want the dark center that looks like this, that really makes the flowers pop. Some of them can be left light because you want them in the background, but the main ones that you want more focus, it would be nice to have some nice darks. I'm going to switch the colors and do like a bluish sort of version now. So let me just see what colors I have. This is permanent mauve. It's a very dark purple. This is not what I want. All the blues sort of look the same until I actually swatch them. So I need a little bit of swatching to happen before I can decide which blue. I think this might be it, the cobalt blue. Yeah, let's do cobalt. And I'll get like a nice dark blue for the center, so that'll be pretty. Or even a Payne's gray for the center would be nice. Indigo, I've got indigo here. I think indigo would go well. Yeah, let's use indigo and cobalt blue. There we go. So I want the cobalt blue to be very, very muted down, just because I'd like it to almost look like maybe it's white in comparison to these guys here. So same technique, pressing down, getting more water to really water this down and pulling all the color to the center. I'm going to get a little bit more of that cobalt blue and quickly paint in the rest, the other two petals. Again, just make sure you're adding enough water in your petals, because we are taking time to do 3 of them in one go. So when we go in with the dark hue, we need to make sure that the area is nice and damp still. So I've got my 3. Dabbing my brush to make sure most of the water is off, and I'm going to take some of that indigo, maybe even mix a little bit if you're unsure what that will look like, and then go in and drop it in by drawing in little lines over the center. I'm gonna drop some over here as well. Almost looks like a turquoisey blue here. So now you can see the lines more as we're adding this in. They are blurry and giving you a nice blend, or giving me a nice blend. But the reason they're retaining their shape, their linear shape, is because of the amount of dampness. We waited for it. We did all three before we went in and added this in. So it allowed for a little bit of drying to happen before we added this in. So that is what is giving me that retaining of shape effect. So I'm going to get a little bit more of the color and drop it in the absolute center here, just to get that nice super dark area, because remember, watercolor dries off lighter. And then washed off my brush, and so we want those nice long linear textures going into our petal. So you just take the water, using just the water on your brush, you're lightly sort of grazing and pulling outward. And again, I have done tons of videos for you guys showing you how to get a little bit more brush control while you're trying to get thin stems or thin lines or anything that requires thin strokes as opposed to the thick ones. And this is, again, something you can do, lightly grazing, to get more practice. So I'm literally pulling the color from the center and just lightly sweeping off. I'm not pulling and stopping, I'm kind of dragging my brush off the sheet. Almost like a flick of the wrist. And there we go. That's what you get. Okay, so let's do a nice dark petal for this one, and then we have that variation of a pansy happening before we tackle the centers for the top two. So adding my little swirl at the top, and then we outline the petal. And pull all the color downward to the center here. You're framing the other two petals. And there you have that one. So we've done this. Let's add, oh, actually before I just want to make sure that the distribution of color is good. So I'm just going over it and just pulling some of the color downward, because sometimes it can dry off with a weird texture. It's nice and dark. Okay, then we're going back to this one, and notice how it dried off and it's smooth. And so we want this sort of dark look. Same thing over here. So we're going to do what wet on dry. So if the wet on wet technique doesn't work, it didn't work here, we're going to do the wet on dry to achieve our effect. So mixing some of the, make sure I got my colors here, cobalt violet with the Payne's gray to get my dark color, because I don't want to use a direct black or a direct Payne's gray. I want to get a darker version of the color I've used, which always makes for a nicer end result. And then we're doing what we did here with the light grazing to get our lines. So I'm going to start lightly grazing using the tip of my brush, making sure I got a nice dark opaque blend of color And if you're unsure about the thick strokes, the amount of thickness you can get, I suggest practicing before you tackle these flowers. Practicing your little thin strokes. So using just the tip of my brush, resting my palm on the table, and lightly pulling toward the center of the flower. And you're just grazing the sheet. Like so. Same thing here. And there you go. You can see how it's a lot darker. Okay, my camera battery is going to die soon. I will change it. Just letting you guys know. I'm doing the same thing with the same color over here. I know we used a slightly different color, but I think it should be fine. Still does the job. There we go. So you can see how you can achieve that effect. Like you can come across instances where things mess up, look like this, end up drying up like this. Paper matters. The kind of paper that you use matters. The amount of water that you use matters. The amount of so many things matter, really. But if you know the medium well enough and how it works, you're able to save it and look at the end results that we have over here. This blue, or the Payne's Gray sort of seeped into it, but it still looks like a very natural looking peony. So don't stress about the small stuff. When you practice this enough and you understand how it works, you're able to get startlingly nice effects. And collectively, they look really wholesome and pretty. Okay, so I think this would be it for today's class. Let me know in the comments if anyone had any questions. I'm not going to take this further because I feel like I put like a lot of info in this, so I hope it's helpful enough. My challenge for you guys, I'm going to do this as something new, is I want to see you guys paint this, but I'd love to see you also elevate your paintings by taking the petals and creating some leaves. Refer to the leaf video that I have posted for you guys if you're unsure, and this way you might get some nice ideas as well. So looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Tag me, send me a DM if you want to, ask me any questions if anything was unclear. I think I covered a lot. And that's it. Thank you guys for joining. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. No one's mentioned any questions yet, but that door is always open in case anyone would like to. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. I'm sure like a lot of you have a lot of stuff happening today because it's Sunday. So take care and we will chat soon. Bye, Jill. I don't know who else is here.